I still remember the exact moment the email landed in my inbox. The subject line wasn't dramatic or angry. It read simply, "Let's handle this like adults." The words hit harder than any bomb in Kandahar. No warning, no goodbye call, just a cold message with attachments I never thought I'd see. My name is Marcus Flynn. I'm 38, a staff sergeant in the 101st Airborne, and for nearly 14 years, I was married to someone I thought was my partner for life. But on that dusty base halfway across the world, I found out the truth. I was 4 months into my latest deployment in Afghanistan. Long days under the blazing sun, nights spent restless in a bunk that smelled like sweat and gun oil. The mission was tough, but that message made everything worse. My wife, Emily, had sent divorce papers, emptied our joint bank account, and worse, moved her boyfriend into the home we shared back in Virginia. I read that email twice, not because I doubted the words, but because I couldn't believe the calmness of it. No explanations, no apologies, just the facts laid bare like a battlefield map. I closed my laptop, stepped into the communal shower stall, letting the hot water wash away more than just dust and grime. I let it wash away the shock, the betrayal, the fury. When I got dressed for my shift, I said nothing to anyone. My bunkmate Carl noticed my quietness. Military men are trained to recognize when a brother is down. He didn't press. He knew better than to prod a wound. "You good?" he asked, eyes still on his book. "Yeah," I muttered, "just stuff back home." That was all. Before the email, things had been different. Emily had changed slowly. It started with small things. She stopped asking about my day, started working late at the dental office, signed up for the gym, but never really went, wore new clothes, had new friends I'd never met. There were passwords on her phone I didn't know. I didn't snoop, never was that kind of man, but I wasn't blind. I took quiet precautions. Nothing flashy. I secured important papers. Our marriage license, house deed, in my name only thanks to the VA loan. My military paperwork. In a rented storage unit across town. I transferred some money to a separate bank account in my name only. Just enough to keep a foothold if things went south. The night before deployment, Emily hugged me at the airport. Her eyes were dry, like she was saying goodbye to a coworker, not a husband going to war. I should have known then, but hope has a stubborn grip. I met Emily at a friend's barbecue in 2010. She was finishing nursing school then, but took a quieter administrative job at a dental practice. Said it was less stressful. We married 8 months later. She said she was proud of my service, though she never quite understood it. Her family was from a different world. Bankers, pharmacists, no soldiers. Our house was modest, but ours, bought in 2014 with a VA loan in my name. I added Emily to the deed because that's what married people do. Share. We had losses, too. My dad died shortly after we married, a heart attack shoveling snow. Mom passed a few years later from lung cancer, though she never smoked a day. They left some money, enough to clear student loans and build a cushion for deployments in 14 years. Each time I came back, Emily seemed more distant, restless. Once she told me she was tired of being alone all the time. I got it, but the Army was my home, my purpose. 2019 was when cracks widened. She'd get irritated when I called during her girls' nights. She talked about Melissa, a friend who divorced and lived her best life. She said we didn't have much in common anymore. Counseling was suggested but dismissed. Work got late. Weekends were for friends I'd never met. New clothes. Gym memberships she hardly used. I didn't confront her. Dad taught me to think first, speak later. So I watched and prepared because my gut said something was coming. 2 weeks after the email, I was in the mess hall when my phone buzzed. Another withdrawal. $88,500 gone. Our joint account was nearly empty. $22 left. Savings wiped clean. $47,000 vanished. The money had been moved in small amounts for weeks. Then big transfers started the day I deployed. I told Carl. He didn't react much, just a grunt. I locked my phone and sat in the hallway. Around me, life went on. Laughter, calls to loved ones. My life was burning down in silence. That's when I knew. At night, I accessed our home security cameras remotely. The footage was proof enough. A strange truck in the driveway, a man I'd never seen walking our dog, using my coffee mug, wearing my Seahawk sweatshirt, Emily laughing in the kitchen, the house I'd renovated with my own hands. Something inside me shifted, not anger, not sadness, but focus. Cold, clear, strategic. I wasn't going to yell or plead. I was going to act. The next hours were a blur. Calls to my lawyer buddy James, Master Sergeant about emergency leave, checking VA loan papers, reviewing bank accounts. I was planning a mission. This wasn't personal anymore. It was war. When you're deployed, you learn fast that the battlefield isn't just a place of bullets and explosions. Sometimes it's the quiet moments that hit the hardest. Sitting alone in a rented motel room under a harsh fluorescent light, my mind was racing, but my face was calm. I'd been given the divorce papers as a PDF attachment, but the real war was just beginning. I woke up early the next morning before my shift, pulled out my laptop, and logged into every system I could access remotely. Military life had taught me the value of preparedness, and I had used my last leave to install security cameras inside and outside our home. Now those cameras were my eyes, and I studied every frame with cold calculation. The strange truck in our driveway wasn't just an odd visitor. It was Jeremy's truck, Emily's boyfriend, the man who had taken my place without ceremony or warning. I watched him walk our German Shepherd, Scout, using my coffee mug like he belonged there. Every moment etched itself into my mind. This wasn't a passing phase or a breakdown. This was a calculated takeover. I contacted my friend James, who had left the Army years ago and now worked as a lawyer specializing in military cases. I sent him an email with the subject line, "Need legal help, discreet and urgent." I knew that once I opened this door, there was no going back. James called me within the hour. His voice was low, calm, professional. "Marcus, what you're describing, it's serious. Forged signatures, stolen funds, possible fraud. You need to build a paper trail and fast." I told him everything. The emptied accounts, the forged refinancing paperwork, the sudden transfers, Emily's disappearance from my life. James advised me to get a copy of all bank statements, loan documents, anything linked to the house and our finances. I called the bank's fraud department from the base phone center, using a burner phone I bought weeks before, just in case. They confirmed that Emily had been transferring money out of our joint accounts for months, starting with small amounts, then bigger withdrawals the day I deployed. They flagged a suspicious refinance application on our house using my name, but the signature was off. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had forged my signature to take out a second loan on the house. The implications were staggering. My home, the one place I thought was safe, was now weaponized against me. I spent nights reviewing every piece of evidence I could find. It was like piecing together a map of betrayal and greed. I made lists, bank accounts, loan officers, real estate agents, anyone connected to transactions. I learned the name Jeremy Ryan repeatedly showed up in documents, but there was also another name, Daniel Spencer, linked to several transactions and property listings. Emily had left no stone unturned. Whoever she was working with had planned this carefully. But why? What was the end game? James theorized that Jeremy and Daniel were part of a scheme targeting military families, women whose husbands were deployed, vulnerable, isolated. The plan was to force quick sales of properties at below market prices, siphon off money, and disappear. Emily's name was on the deed because I'd added her when we married, but the loan was in my name alone. That gave them just enough leverage. It was a spiderweb I never saw until now. My emotions didn't betray me. Anger simmered beneath a cool surface. Years in combat zones had trained me to stay calm under pressure. My focus was on strategy, securing my rights, protecting my assets, and bringing these people to justice. I requested emergency leave from my unit, citing family emergency without giving details. The Army bureaucracy was slow, but I was used to waiting and planning during delays. Back in Virginia, I checked into a motel near our neighborhood under a false name. I was ready to face Emily, but I needed to see the house. The place that was once my sanctuary now felt like a trap. Her boyfriend's truck was gone, but Emily's car sat in the driveway. I parked a block away, watching. I saw her leave later, heading toward a local cafe. I didn't follow. Not yet. Instead, I met with James in a nearby diner. He handed me a thick folder with copies of the refinance application, bank statements, and the forged signature comparison. The signature on the loan documents was almost identical to mine, except for subtle differences in pen pressure and the middle initial. "This is forgery," James said quietly, "and it's criminal." He also pointed out the refinance loan amount, $350,000, and the list price on the property, $470,000. Daniel Spencer, the real estate agent, specialized in quick sales and cash deals. I knew then this wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was organized crime, preying on military families. The next day, I went to the bank to speak with the loan officer who handled the refinance. I showed him my military ID, my driver's license with the real signature and the forged paperwork. His face went pale. "We'll have to report this immediately," he said. I'd already filed a police report remotely. James had helped me draft a formal complaint. I also contacted the county clerk's office and filed paperwork to contest the refinance due to fraud. I registered a formal notice that no changes could be made to the property without my presence. 2 days later, Emily called. I let it go to voicemail. The words echoed in my head. "Let's handle this like adults." I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Then things escalated. My lawyer called with news. Jeremy Ryan had been pulled over driving my truck on a suspended license. He had 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from years ago. The police impounded the vehicle, and prescription pads from Emily's dental office were found in the truck, not blank pads, but actual stolen ones. This was bigger than I thought. The theft, the forgery, the financial drain. It all pointed to a network exploiting trust and vulnerability. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division got involved. They recognized a pattern. Spouses deploying, others using the opportunity to commit fraud and theft. My case was one of several, but it might be the key to breaking the whole ring. Agent Patel and Agent Donovan took my statement. They showed me surveillance footage from our home, recorded conversations implicating Jeremy and Daniel. The truth was unfolding, and I was ready to fight. At night, sitting alone in that motel room, I felt a strange calm. I wasn't just a victim. I was a soldier, trained, prepared, focused. My mission was clear. Reclaim what was mine, expose the fraud, and protect others from falling into the same trap. Sometimes betrayal comes in quiet emails. Sometimes it comes wrapped in smiles and lies. But justice has a way of finding the truth, and I was ready to see it through. The next few weeks felt like living in a shadow world. Every day brought new challenges, and every night was filled with restless calculations. When you're a soldier, you learn to compartmentalize, separate mission from emotion, control the chaos inside while managing the chaos outside. This wasn't a firefight, but it was a war all the same. Emily had vanished from my life, but her presence lingered everywhere. In the empty rooms of the house, in the stacks of bills and statements I poured over in the weight of betrayal that settled cold and steady like a shadow. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Anger was messy and unpredictable. I was focused on precision, on strategy. James had been invaluable. Every document I handed over, every new lead we uncovered, built a tighter case. The forged refinance application was just the start. We traced wire transfers, multiple accounts, third parties involved. Names I'd never heard before popped up: lawyers, real estate agents, middlemen. It was a network, a well-oiled machine designed to prey on military families left vulnerable by deployment. The bank froze the refinance funds after my complaint, but that was just a temporary win. We discovered nearly $60,000 had already been siphoned off to an account under the name Daniel Spencer. That name kept coming back, a shadowy figure who seemed to control the property flips and quick sales. I spent hours researching Daniel Spencer, piecing together his history. A real estate agent with a spotless public record, but a trail of rumors beneath the surface. Whispers about deals that seemed too good to be true, properties changing hands under suspicious circumstances, wives left scrambling after their spouses returned from duty. The FBI had joined the investigation by then. Agent Patel was straightforward, professional, and persistent. We met regularly, sometimes in person, sometimes over secure calls. They were building their case with our evidence, but cautioned me to keep my distance from Emily and Jeremy. This was bigger than a personal vendetta. It was a federal case. Meanwhile, life in the barracks carried on. My brothers in arms noticed my quiet intensity, but gave me space. They knew better than to push. Deployment had taught us all to carry burdens silently. I thought about Scout often, our dog who'd been left behind when Emily changed the locks. I arranged for a trusted friend to take care of him. Scout was more than a pet. He was a reminder of the life I was fighting to reclaim. At home, the house stood empty, a ghost of memories. I drove past it one afternoon, careful not to draw attention. The lawn was overgrown, the curtains drawn. Jeremy's truck was gone, but Emily's car still sat in the driveway. I resisted the urge to knock on the door, to confront, to scream. That wasn't my fight anymore. My fight was legal, calculated, methodical. James had filed all the necessary paperwork to contest the refinance and freeze any further transactions. We also issued formal notices to the county clerk's office, ensuring no changes could be made to the property title without my consent. But Emily wasn't finished yet. One morning, I received a text from her. Simple, chilling. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow. My first instinct was to ignore it. James agreed. No good would come from meeting her without legal counsel. But part of me wanted to understand, to see what was left of the woman I'd once loved. I told James about the message. He advised me to bring someone with me if I decided to go. I decided not to go at all. Instead, I tracked her movements through the security cameras I'd installed. At 9:30 a.m. the next day, she left the house, heading to the park alone. That's when Daniel Spencer showed up. A sleek black SUV with his real estate logo pulled into the driveway. Jeremy came out to meet him. They talked for a long time inside the house. I streamed the live security footage to James, who recorded every moment on his phone. The conversation was a transaction, a plan to list the house quickly, to seal the deal before I could intervene. Spencer was confident. We'll list at $470,000. The buyer's ready with cash. Jeremy gets $420,000. Everyone wins. Jeremy waved off concerns about me. Military guys all make noise but have deployments. He'll settle for a quick payout. I sat back in the motel chair, watching my life being auctioned off in real time. That night, the FBI moved in. More than a dozen vehicles surrounded the house before dawn. Agents in suits and badges executed search warrants, confiscating boxes of documents, electronics, and phones. I watched from a safe distance, feeling a strange mix of vindication and loss. Emily appeared, hands trembling, watching as the walls I'd built with her were emptied by strangers. Agent Patel called me later that day. We have enough evidence for multiple charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and attempted sale under false pretenses. Your case is pivotal. She warned me again, don't confront them. Let the investigation proceed. Weeks turned into months. Jeremy and Daniel were arrested, charged, and arraigned. The extent of their scheme unfolded. Dozens of military families scammed, homes sold far below market value, money disappearing into offshore accounts. Emily's involvement was murky. She claimed ignorance, said Jeremy coerced her, but forged signatures and transactions bore her fingerprints. The court would decide. I faced my own demons quietly. The loss of trust, the rupture of what I thought was home. Yet beneath it all was a resolve to rebuild. In the end, the divorce was finalized with a clean break. Emily surrendered claims to the house and my military pension. Restitution was ordered for the stolen funds. Jeremy received a lengthy prison sentence. Daniel was sentenced even longer. I sold the house soon after, unable to stay surrounded by ghosts. The money bought me a small cabin in Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a creek running through the land. Peace at last. Scout was with me, loyal as ever. Sometimes I still think about Emily. not with bitterness, but with a quiet understanding. People make choices. So do I. My military career ended early with honorable retirement. Now, I build with my hands. Carpentry work, quiet days, and a life reclaimed from the ashes. One day, I got a letter from a Navy wife in Texas. She'd been caught in the same scheme. She thanked me for bringing the truth to light, for giving her family a fighting chance. That's when I knew the battle wasn't just mine. It was for every soldier who left home trusting the life they built would still be waiting. And sometimes that's enough. Deployment had taught me a lot about patience, waiting for the right moment to act, knowing that rushing leads to mistakes. This fight was no different. I was no longer just a soldier in a foreign land. I was a soldier reclaiming a life that had been stolen piece by piece. The months after the FBI's raid were some of the hardest I'd ever faced, even if I didn't show it. You learn quickly that pain doesn't have to roar to be real. It can be a cold, steady hum in your chest. I woke up every day with the weight of it, but I didn't let it break me. James and I stayed in constant contact. The legal battle was slow, methodical, and exhausting. I signed countless affidavits, attended meetings, provided every shred of evidence I could muster. The forged signatures, the financial transfers, the real estate documents, all painstakingly cataloged. Emily's lawyers pushed back hard. They tried to paint me as the villain, claiming my deployments had driven a wedge in the marriage, that I'd abandoned her. But the evidence was clear. Forged documents, financial fraud, and a cold betrayal that started long before I saw it. One evening, after a long day of court appearances and interviews with FBI agents, I sat alone on the porch of my cabin in Montana. The sky was clear, a million stars burning quietly above. Scout lay curled at my feet, breathing steady and calm. It was moments like these that reminded me why I fought so hard, not just for the money or the house, but for a future free from deceit, where trust could be rebuilt slowly and surely. The cabin was simple, but it was mine. No one could take this land away with forged papers or false signatures. Out here, I was in control. The FBI continued their investigation into Jeremy Ryan and Daniel Spencer's network. Agent Patel told me they'd uncovered a sprawling operation that crossed state lines, preying on deployed soldiers and their families. Jeremy had a pattern of seducing spouses during deployments, then convincing them to participate in fraudulent sales. Daniel facilitated the quick flips, washing the money through a series of shell companies. The scale was shocking, but I wasn't surprised. I'd heard stories from other soldiers, whispered warnings about the new threat that wasn't in any war zone. James worked tirelessly alongside the FBI, coordinating legal strategies and ensuring that the victims' rights were front and center. It was a complex dance between law enforcement and legal battle, but every step brought me closer to justice. Meanwhile, life demanded a new kind of discipline. I threw myself into carpentry work during the day, building decks, fixing fences, crafting cabinets for neighbors. The physical labor soothed the mind in ways nothing else could. My hands grew calloused, but I welcomed the reminder that I was creating something real. At night, I studied military manuals and legal texts, a habit I'd picked up during quieter tours overseas. I was preparing not just for court, but for a future where I control my destiny. Scout was my constant companion. The bond we shared was unspoken but profound. He was more than a dog. He was a reminder of loyalty and trust in a world that had shown me too little of either. The media caught wind of the case eventually. Local news stations ran segments on the FBI's bust of the fraudulent scheme, highlighting the victims and the damage done to military families. At first, I kept my distance. I didn't want my face splashed across headlines or to be the story. But then I received messages, letters, emails, even phone calls from other service members and spouses. One letter stood out. A woman named Sarah from Virginia wrote to thank me. She and her husband had been targeted by a similar scheme, but hadn't known where to turn. My case gave her hope, a roadmap to fight back. It was humbling. The weight of my battles suddenly felt lighter. Share with others who understood. Court hearings dragged on. Emily's testimony was guarded, defensive. She claimed ignorance, that Jeremy had coerced her. But the evidence painted a different picture. I never relished the courtroom drama. I let the facts speak for themselves. The forged signatures, the paper trails, the wire transfers. They told the story I couldn't. James reminded me often, this is about truth, Marcus, not revenge. And he was right. In quieter moments, I thought about what the future might hold. Could I ever trust again? Could I rebuild a life where I didn't have to check emails for betrayal? The scars ran deep, but they also reminded me of strength I didn't know I had. Sometimes, I imagine Scout and me on a trail through the Montana wilderness, far from the chaos. A life built slowly, day by day. And that vision kept me going. The battle was far from over, but with each passing day, the noose around Jeremy and Daniel tightened. Emily's role will be decided by the courts, but I felt a sense of control returning. This wasn't just about a house or stolen money. It was about standing firm when the world tried to take everything from you, and I wasn't backing down. The longer this dragged on, the more I realized just how much betrayal can look like quiet calculation. It's not always the big explosions, the yelling matches, or the moments of wild anger. Sometimes it's a slow erosion of trust, the faintest shadows cast long before the fall. I kept replaying that email in my mind, the cold, clipped words that arrived as I was stationed halfway across the world. No warning, no explanation, just an attachment that ended 13 years of marriage. The sting wasn't in the message itself. It was in the silence that followed, the way everyone else seemed to move on, but I was stuck watching the slow unravel from thousands of miles away. Days blurred into weeks. The FBI investigation deepened. Agent Patel kept me in the loop, but always reminded me to stay cautious. Marcus, this network is more extensive than you think. There are others like Jeremy and Daniel out there targeting vulnerable families. Your case is just the tip of the iceberg. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just fighting for my home or my finances. I was part of a larger battle, one that reached into communities across states, across families, across lives. James dug into court records and uncovered other victims who had come forward, military spouses who'd been coaxed, pressured, and manipulated into signing away their rights. Homes sold under duress. Lives uprooted. Families shattered. I received letters from some of them. Thank you notes. Stories of heartbreak and resilience. Their voices mixed with mine, forming a chorus demanding justice. The legal process was grueling. Emily's defense team worked tirelessly to cast doubt on every piece of evidence. They painted a picture of a husband absent too long, a wife pushed to the edge. But facts don't lie. The forensic handwriting expert testified about the subtle differences in the signatures on the refinanced documents. Small variations that only a trained eye could catch. Bank statements showed a clear trail of money moving away from accounts we'd built together. Phone records placed Jeremy and Daniel in constant contact. Through it all, I maintained a quiet resolve. I had no desire to humiliate Emily publicly. I wanted the truth to come out and for justice to be served. One afternoon, after a long court session, I found myself walking the streets of Spokane. The city looked different now, familiar but somehow distant. Places we'd once shared memories felt empty, echoing with ghosts. Scout trotted beside me, his leash slack in my hand. The dog was calm, unaware of the human complexities swirling around us. I stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench beneath the shade of a maple tree. I let myself think, not about legal battles or fraud schemes, but about what came next. Could I rebuild? Could trust ever return? The answer came slowly. A few weeks later, James called with news that surprised me. Marcus, the FBI has uncovered new evidence. There's a financial link between Jeremy's associates and a major real estate investment group. This goes higher than we thought. Suddenly, the case wasn't just about two men and a scorned wife. It was about an entire network profiting from the vulnerability of military families. Agent Patel shared the same news. We're coordinating with federal prosecutors now. This could lead to indictments of several key players. It was a small victory in a long war, but it gave me hope. Back at the cabin, life continued quietly. I spent long hours in the workshop, crafting furniture, repairing homes for neighbors. The physical labor was grounding, a reminder that despite everything lost, I could still build something real. Scout was my shadow, a constant companion through the dark nights and hopeful mornings. Some nights, I stayed up late reading letters from other victims. Their words inspired me. They reminded me that this fight was bigger than me. Meanwhile, Emily's role in the scheme was becoming clearer. Court transcripts revealed that she had been involved in key transactions, signing documents, transferring funds. Whether coerced or complicit, the evidence weighed heavily against her. I never wished harm on her, but I wanted accountability. The media coverage grew. Local news highlighted the FBI bust, calling it one of the largest cases of military family fraud in recent years. I kept my face out of it, but allowed my story to be told anonymously through James. If it could warn just one family, it was worth it. Then came a moment I didn't expect. One evening, a letter arrived at my cabin. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Emily, she wrote that she never intended for things to end like this. That she was sorry, not just for what she did, but for the pain caused. She said she was cooperating with the authorities, hoping to make amends. I read the letter twice before placing it on the table. The words stirred a mix of old memories and fresh wounds, but they didn't shake my resolve. The fight was far from over. There were still court dates, testimonies, and the looming sentencing. The financial damage was deep, but the lessons were clearer. Trust must be earned. Betrayal can come from the closest places. And sometimes, strength means standing firm when everything falls apart. As I looked out over the Montana sunset, Scout resting at my feet, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Not because the battle was won, but because I was still standing, still fighting, still building. The court dates came in waves, each one tested my resolve and pushing me to confront memories I thought I'd buried long ago. Every time I sat in that courtroom, watching the people who once shared my life now become strangers, it felt like peeling away layers of a wound that refused to heal. Emily sat across the room during the hearings. Her posture was rigid, her eyes avoiding mine, but the weight between us was undeniable. She wasn't the woman I married, not anymore, and yet, seeing her there reminded me of the years we spent trying to build something together, of the small moments of laughter and hope before everything shattered. The judge was thorough, patient but stern. This wasn't a simple divorce case anymore. The evidence piled high. Forged signatures, fraudulent refinancing, bank statements tracing the flow of stolen money. It was a story of betrayal and greed played out against a backdrop of military service and sacrifice. One day, during a particularly long session, I noticed something unexpected. Emily appeared more vulnerable than before. Her defense attorney tried to shield her, but cracks showed. At one point, she glanced briefly at me. Not with hatred, but maybe with regret. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Outside the courtroom, life at the cabin grounded me. I kept busy with carpentry projects, fixing up homes, crafting furniture, helping neighbors. The physical work was a balm for the mind, a way to turn pain into purpose. Scout was always there, his loyal presence a steady reminder that despite everything, I wasn't alone. Meanwhile, James kept me informed of every new development. The FBI had uncovered more suspects linked to Jeremy and Daniel's operation, a network that reached into multiple states, exploiting deployed service members' absence. We're coordinating with federal prosecutors. James told me over the phone one evening, "This is becoming a major crackdown. Your case has helped expose a pattern of systemic fraud." I nodded silently, feeling a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. The battle was far from over, but progress was undeniable. The financial strain was real. Though restitution was ordered, the reality of rebuilding from zero hit hard. But I reminded myself daily, money could be regained. Trust and peace were the real victories. I took long walks along the Montana trails, Scout at my side, thinking about the future. What did I want beyond this fight? A life rebuilt slowly. A life where I could find peace, not just victory. One afternoon, a letter arrived that stopped me cold. It was from a woman named Sarah, the Navy wife from Texas. She shared her story, how Jeremy and Daniel had targeted her family, how she'd been blindsided, confused, and scared. "I want to thank you," she wrote. "Because of your courage, we had hope. We fought back. We're rebuilding too. Her words hit me harder than any courtroom testimony. This wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about hundreds of families caught in the crossfire of greed and betrayal. The media caught wind of the case again. Local news outlets covered the arrests and ongoing trials. I stayed most out of the spotlight, preferring to focus on healing and justice rather than headlines. But I allowed James to share my story anonymously, hoping it would warn others to be vigilant. Emily's testimony was difficult to hear. She claimed coercion, manipulation by Jeremy, a woman trapped in a scheme she didn't fully understand. Whether that was true or a defense tactic, the court would decide. Her statements didn't erase the forged documents, the transfers, or the broken trust, but they added complexity, a reminder that sometimes victims and perpetrators overlap. One night, after a long day in court, I sat on my porch, Scout's head resting in my lap. The sky was clear, the stars bright. I let myself feel the exhaustion, the grief, and something else. Hope. The fight had changed me, made me stronger, made me realize what mattered. The sentencing loomed ahead. Jeremy and Daniel faced serious prison time. Emily's fate hung in the balance, dependent on her cooperation and the court's judgment. But no matter the outcome, I knew I was reclaiming more than money or property. I was reclaiming my life. As the months passed, I focused on building that life. Quiet days, honest work, and small moments of peace. Scout and I walked the trails, explored the forest, and found solace in the wild. I wasn't the same man who'd opened that email 13 years after marriage. I was someone new, wiser, steadier, and ready to face whatever came next. The courtroom felt like a different kind of battlefield, one where every word, every document, every silent glance mattered. The raw violence of battlefield was replaced with cold strategy and meticulous examination, but the stakes were no less real. This was my fight now. Emily's testimony had become a turning point in the case. She stood in front of the judge, a figure shadowed by the weight of her choices and the consequences she could no longer avoid. She claimed she had been manipulated, pressured by Jeremy, the man whose charm masked the predator beneath. She said she'd been scared, trapped in a world of lies she didn't fully understand. I watched quietly as she spoke, listening not with anger, but with a strange mix of pity and resolve. Years of marriage, of shared memories, suddenly felt like echoes in a cavernous space where trust had long since crumbled. Her defense lawyers argued fiercely, trying to paint me as an absentee husband whose deployments fractured a marriage beyond repair. They claimed my distance created a void Emily tried desperately to fill, a narrative meant to deflect blame. But facts don't bend easily. Forensic experts testified to forged signatures, to the unmistakable trail of bank transfers that drained our joint accounts. Real estate professionals confirmed the sham refinance, where my name was copied but my consent was stolen. Even the security footage, viewed again and again, showed Jeremy and Daniel in our home, plotting the sale that wasn't theirs to make. The judge listened with an expression that gave nothing away. His role was to untangle the truth from a web of deception and hurt. Outside the courtroom, life at the cabin was my refuge. Montana's vast wilderness wrapped around me like a shield from the chaos. I poured my energy into carpentry, each piece of which shaped and smoothed a reminder that I could still build something real. The rhythmic sound of saws and hammers became my meditation, grounding me when the weight of the case threatened to swallow me whole. Scout was more than a companion. He was my anchor. His steady presence calmed restless nights, his knowing eyes a silent affirmation that despite everything, I was not alone. James and I remained in close contact. His calls were lifelines, delivering updates on the FBI's widening investigation. More names emerged. Associates who had profited from the scheme, clients who had bought homes under false pretenses. The scale was staggering, a criminal network thriving on the absence and vulnerability of deployed soldiers. Marcus, James said one evening, voice steady but urgent. The prosecutors are ready to move forward with indictments. This is bigger than just Jeremy and Daniel. We're talking organized crime. The news was a bitter victory. It meant the fight was far from over, but it also meant justice might finally reach beyond my own case to protect others. Financially, the damage was severe. The Though courts order restitution, the reality of starting over hit hard. But every dollar was a step toward reclaiming my life, and I reminded myself daily that money could be replaced. Trust, once shattered, was harder to rebuild. I spent evenings walking the trails near the cabin, Scout at my side. The Montana sky stretched endlessly above us, a reminder of vast possibilities beyond my pain. Then came the letter from Sarah, the Navy wife from Texas. Her words were raw, heartfelt. I was blindsided by Jeremy and Daniel's scheme. I felt lost and scared, but your case gave me strength. We fought back, and we're rebuilding. Thank you for showing me it's possible to survive and heal. Her letter was a lifeline, a reminder that I was part of something greater, that my fight wasn't just personal, but a beacon for others ensnared in similar darkness. Media attention grew. Local news outlets covered the arrests and ongoing trials, emphasizing the impact on military families. I kept my identity mostly private, allowing James to share my story anonymously. The courtroom drama unfolded with relentless intensity. Emily's defense grew desperate, trying to distance her from the conspiracy, casting her as a victim caught in the web. But the weight of evidence was crushing. Witnesses testified about forged documents, suspicious transactions, and phone records showing frequent contact between Jeremy, Daniel, and Emily. The narrative of coercion struggled to hold against facts and testimonies. One night, I sat alone on the porch, Scout's head resting on my lap. The sky was clear, the stars countless and cold. I let myself feel the exhaustion, the grief, and a flicker of hope. This fight had changed me, shaped me into someone I hadn't expected to become. Wiser, steadier, and with a resolve forged in fire. The sentencing date loomed. Jeremy and Daniel faced long prison terms for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Emily's fate hinged on her cooperation and the court's judgment. But beyond the court, I began to envision a new beginning. A life built on trust, honesty, and quiet strength. Slowly, I returned to a rhythm of peace. Days filled with carpentry, evenings with Scout and the vast Montana wilderness. The wounds were not gone, but they were healing. The battle was far from over, but I was still standing, still fighting, still building. The court proceedings had become a relentless grind, stretching my patience and testing my nerves every single day. I sat through hours of testimony, watched lawyers trade barbs disguised as legal arguments, and waited as the layers of betrayal unfolded in painstaking detail. The weight of everything felt heavier with each passing session. Emily's face was a study in exhaustion and regret. Sometimes I caught a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, like the woman she once was, before the web of lies and deceit swallowed her whole. Other times, her expression was carefully guarded, as if shielding herself from the storm she helped unleash. The prosecution was thorough. They called expert witnesses to explain the nuances of forgery, detailed bank records showing the siphoning of funds, and real estate experts to clarify the fraudulent refinancing that threatened to rip my home from my grasp. The evidence was damning. Jeremy and Daniel's connections to a larger criminal network became clearer as well. Wire transfers between shell companies, obscure real estate transactions, and patterns of targeting deployed military families all painted a chilling picture of exploitation and greed. Yet, amidst the legal chaos, I found moments of quiet clarity. Sitting in that Montana cabin after long days in court, I realized something profound. I was no longer just fighting to reclaim what was stolen from me. I was fighting for every soldier and spouse who could be the next target. My story had become a warning, a beacon for those in the shadows. The letters from other victims, like Sarah's, arrived steadily. Stories of heartbreak, resilience, and hope. I kept them pinned on my workshop wall, a reminder that this battle was bigger than just me. Financially, the toll was undeniable. Restitution was ordered, but the reality of rebuilding from the wreckage was daunting. Every dollar I reclaimed was a step toward healing, but the scars ran deeper than money could fix. One evening, as I sat in my workshop, crafting a simple wooden chair, Scout curled up at my feet. I let myself reflect on what the future might hold. Would I ever find peace? Could I trust again? Or was this betrayal a permanent fracture in my life's foundation? The media coverage intensified. Local news picked up the story, highlighting the systemic nature of the fraud and its impact on military families. I stayed mostly in the background, allowing James to share my story anonymously. If my experience could save even one family from similar devastation, it was worth it. Emily's role remained complex. Her defense maintained that she was manipulated by Jeremy, a pawn in a larger game. Whether true or strategy to avoid harsher penalties, the court had to weigh her words against the hard evidence. At one point, during a recess, I overheard her speaking softly with her attorney, words laced with fear and regret. The woman I once loved was lost in a maze of her own making. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the Montana wilderness, I wrestled with the ghosts of the past and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The silence was both a comfort and a torment. Scout's steady breathing beside me was a constant reminder that I was not truly alone. Then came a breakthrough. The FBI, armed with evidence gathered over months, arrested several key figures in the criminal network. The prosecutors moved swiftly to prepare for sentencing. Jeremy and Daniel faced lengthy prison terms. Emily's cooperation became a pivotal factor in her own sentencing. Despite the turmoil, I found solace in the small victories. Each piece of recovered money, each arrested conspirator, was a step toward justice. But the real victory was intangible. A reclaiming of my dignity, my trust in myself, and my hope for a better future. One afternoon, I received a letter that stopped me in my tracks. It was from Emily. Her handwriting was shaky, the words raw. I never wanted to hurt you. I was scared and lost. I'm sorry for everything. I read it over and over, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and closure. As the sentencing day approached, I prepared myself for whatever outcome awaited. The legal battles might end, but the journey of healing was just beginning. The final hearing was intense. The judge handed down sentences that reflected the gravity of the crimes. Jeremy and Daniel would spend years behind bars. Emily received a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation, but faced consequences for her role. I sat quietly, absorbing the weight of it all. After the courtroom emptied, I stepped outside into the cold Montana air. The sky was clear, the stars shimmering like distant promises. Scout nudged my hand gently. Together, we stood looking at the vastness ahead. I had lost much, but I had also found strength. The past could not be changed, but the future was mine to shape. With steady hands and a determined heart, I would build a new life. One grounded in honesty, resilience, and hope. Whenever the silence felt too loud or the memories too sharp, I would read the letters from those I'd helped inspire. Their stories became my armor. Their hope became my guide. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready. This wasn't just the end of the chapter. It was the beginning of everything. The courtroom doors closed behind me, the echo of the final verdict still ringing in my ears. Years of pain, betrayal, and struggle had come down to this moment. A moment both heavy and liberating. Justice had been served, but more importantly, a chapter of my life was finally closing. As I stood in the hallway, the weight of everything I had endured settled over me like a thick fog. The faces of those who'd supported me, especially James and my few trusted friends, flashed through my mind. Without their unwavering belief and tireless effort, none of this would have been possible. I thought about Emily, my ex-wife, the woman whose choices had shattered the life we built together. In some ways, she was a victim of circumstance and manipulation. In others, she was an active participant in a scheme that preyed on the vulnerabilities of military families like mine. The complexity of human nature revealed itself painfully through her actions. Yet, despite everything, I felt no anger now, only a quiet, firm resolve to move forward, returning to the Montana cabin. The familiar smell of pine and fresh air enveloped me, offering a kind of sanctuary I hadn't felt in years. Scout greeted me with a joyful bark, reminding me that life had not lost all its warmth. I spent the first few days simply sitting on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky with hues of orange and purple. Each morning felt like a gift, an opportunity to rebuild and rediscover peace. The legal victory had brought restitution, but the journey to reclaim financial stability was just beginning. I opened a new bank account, carefully managed every dollar, and sought the advice of financial counselors to rebuild what was lost. It was painstaking work, but it was mine. I also started attending support groups for military veterans and families affected by fraud. Sharing my story, listening to others, and offering whatever help I could became a source of healing. There was strength in community, a reminder that even in the darkest times, we are not alone. One evening, I received a message that surprised me. It was from Sarah, the Navy wife in Texas who had once been a victim of the same scheme. "I wanted to let you know," she wrote, "that thanks to your courage and perseverance, we've been able to recover some of what was stolen from us. Your story gave us hope when we needed it most." Her words touched something deep inside me. My battle had transcended personal loss. It had become a beacon for others fighting similar fights. Over time, the media interest waned and the spotlight shifted away. I preferred it that way. The focus was no longer on headlines or public attention. It was about quiet recovery and steady progress. I immersed myself in carpentry projects, building furniture for neighbors and friends. The work kept my hands busy and my mind grounded. There was a certain satisfaction in creating something tangible, something real. Still, there were moments when memories resurfaced, flashes of emails, empty accounts, and the coldness of an email telling me my marriage was over. But those moments were fewer and farther between. Scout remained my constant companion, always ready with a wagging tail and comforting presence. Months passed. Emily's sentence was finalized, her cooperation with authorities earning a reduced term. She moved away, starting a new life under a different name. Whether she found peace or remained haunted by her choices, I did not know, and frankly, I did not need to. I focused on myself and the future. One afternoon, as I walked through town, a familiar face approached me. It was James, my longtime friend and lawyer. "Looks like you're doing well," he said with a grin. Getting there, I replied, "One day at a time." We talked about the future, about the possibility of new ventures and new beginnings. "I think you've earned the right to build something good," James said, "something just for you." And so I began to dream again, not of grand plans or fleeting ambitions, but of simple things, a small workshop where I could create a life marked by peace and honesty, a future shaped by the lessons of the past. Sometimes, late at night, I'd pull out the letters and messages from those who'd reached out, stories of survival, resilience, and hope. They reminded me that even in the darkest times, light could be found. My own story, once marked by betrayal and loss, had become a source of strength for others. That was a victory greater than any legal ruling. The past was behind me now. The future was a canvas waiting to be painted with new colors, colors of healing, growth, and quiet joy. And as I looked out over the Montana landscape, Scout by my side, I knew I was ready for whatever came next. I never imagined that losing everything would teach me more about myself than any victory ever could. The silence inside the Montana cabin often felt louder than the chaos I'd left behind. But in that silence, I found space to breathe, to think, and most importantly, to heal. The long nights sometimes carried the ghosts of my past, moments of betrayal flashing behind closed eyes. But with Scout steady breathing beside me and the gentle wind whispering through the pines, those ghosts slowly lost their grip. They became stories, lessons, chapters that defined the man I was becoming. I thought often about the sacrifices of military life, not just my own, but those of every family stretched thin by deployments, distance, and the uncertainty that comes with service. My own story became a stark reminder that sometimes the battles aren't just overseas. They're fought in homes, in hearts, in trust broken and rebuilt. The restitution money had helped rebuild my financial life, but it couldn't erase the wounds left by betrayal. Yet I chose not to dwell on what was lost. Instead, I embraced what I could build anew. Furniture, friendships, a future grounded in resilience. The support groups became a lifeline. Sharing my story wasn't easy at first, but each time I spoke, I felt a bit more of the weight lift. Listening to others helped me understand that while our battles varied, the courage to face them united us. Sarah's letters remain pinned to my workshop wall, a testament to the ripple effect of perseverance. I often thought about Emily, not with anger or regret, but with a quiet sadness for the woman she had become and the path she'd chosen. The court had given her consequences, but I hoped she found her own redemption, somewhere beyond the pages of our shared history. Our marriage, once a foundation of dreams, had crumbled under the strain of lies and manipulation, but I was determined not to let it define my future. One clear spring morning, I received a call that stirred something unexpected. A local community center was organizing a veteran outreach program and wanted me to speak about my experience. They believed my story could inspire others facing hardship. At first, I hesitated. Opening old wounds in front of strangers felt daunting. But then I remembered the power of shared stories, the way Sarah's letter had given me hope, and I agreed. Standing before a small crowd of veterans and their families, I spoke honestly about betrayal, loss, and the slow climb toward healing. I shared how strategy and calm resolve had been my tools, not anger or despair. Afterwards, a woman approached me quietly. "Thank you," she said softly. "Your story gives me strength." In that moment, I realized that what I had endured was not just a private battle. It was a bridge to others walking difficult paths. Back at the cabin, Scout and I settled into a new rhythm. Days filled with woodworking projects, evenings spent watching the stars stretch across Montana's vast sky. I started keeping a journal, a place to capture thoughts, hopes, and the lessons of each day. The once sharp edges of pain had dulled, replaced by a quiet determination to live fully. Financial stability returned slowly but steadily. I reconnected with old friends, some of whom had quietly supported me through the darkest times. James remained a trusted ally, reminding me that the fight for justice wasn't just legal, it was personal and ongoing. As spring turned to summer, I began to think about what truly mattered. It wasn't possessions or past grievances. It was honesty, integrity, and the courage to keep moving forward even when the path seemed uncertain. I found joy in simple things: Scout's playful antics, the scent of fresh pine, the steady rhythm of a saw shaping a new piece of wood. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. My phone buzzed, a message from an old military buddy, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "How you doing, man? Heard about everything. Proud of you." I smiled, feeling the warmth of connection despite the distance time had put between us. That night, as Scout lay curled beside me, I reflected on the journey from betrayal to healing. The scars would always be there, but they were part of the story that made me who I was. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready for it. The sun rose slowly over the Montana horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the rugged landscape that had become my sanctuary. The cabin stood quiet, embraced by towering pines and the gentle murmur of the creek running behind it. Scout stretched, yawning wide as if sensing today was a day of significance, though I wasn't quite sure if I was ready for what it meant. After everything, the betrayals, the legal battles, the sleepless nights, I had reached a place I once thought impossible: peace. The past was no longer a weight dragging me down, but a foundation from which I could rebuild. The house, the marriage, the stolen years, they were chapters of my life, but not the whole story. I found myself reflecting on the journey, not with bitterness, but with a kind of solemn gratitude. Life had tested me in ways I never expected, but it had also taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, trust, and the power of calm resolve. When I first received that email from Emily, a simple digital note ending 13 years of marriage in cold sentences, my world shattered. Yet I didn't crumble. Instead, I held myself steady, quietly gathering strength, preparing for the battle ahead. It wasn't anger or desperation that guided me. It was clarity. I took deliberate steps to protect what was mine, legally and financially. I didn't lash out or seek vengeance. I strategized. I trusted my instincts and the few people who stood with me. In that stillness, I found power. The unraveling of Emily and Jeremy's scheme was more than just personal justice. It exposed a network of exploitation targeting families like mine. That realization gave my fight meaning beyond my own loss. It was about protecting others, shining a light on shadows that preyed on vulnerability. The FBI's involvement, the arrests, the court rulings, they all validated the truth I held on to in the darkest moments. But the real victory was reclaiming my dignity. I thought often about forgiveness, not as forgetting or excusing what happened, but as releasing the grip bitterness held on my soul. Forgiving Emily, Jeremy, even the pain itself allowed me to breathe freely again. That didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing peace over perpetual war inside my mind. Today, as I stood outside the cabin, Scout at my side, I felt a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and earth. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. It was quiet. It was good. I had rebuilt a life that was truly mine, one shaped not by betrayal, but by endurance and hope. The phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from James. Case closed. Final paper signed. You're free. I smiled, the weight of years lifting at last. Later that afternoon, I drove into town to meet with some of the veterans and families I'd grown close to over the months. Their faces were familiar now, friends bound by shared stories and strength. At the community center, we gathered for a small ceremony marking the end of the legal battle and the start of a new chapter, not just for me, but for all of us who had fought to reclaim what was stolen. One by one, people shared their stories of loss, recovery, and hope. Their words echoed what I'd come to believe. No matter how deep the wound, the human spirit has a remarkable capacity to heal. Returning home, I walked Scout along the creek. The water rushed past, relentless and pure. It reminded me that life moves forward, carrying away the old and bringing the new. Standing by the water's edge, I made a quiet vow to live with honesty, to build with integrity, and to face whatever came next with steady heart and clear mind. That night, under a blanket of stars, I sat on the porch with Scout nestled at my feet. The cabin was warm, filled with the scent of cedar and hope. I pulled out my journal, the pages filled with thoughts, memories, and dreams. I wrote about the journey, its pain, and its lessons. I wrote about the man I had become, a man who had been broken but refused to stay that way, a man who knew that the truest battles aren't fought with guns or anger, but with courage and calm. And as the Montana wind whispered through the trees, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. The story wasn't just about loss or betrayal anymore. It was about survival, redemption, and the quiet, unstoppable strength of moving forward. This was my new beginning. When I closed my journal, I looked up at the night sky, the constellations shining bright, unchanged and eternal. No matter what storms the future held, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready.